Well, first off, I want to thank the board for making the hard decision to bring us all together for this conference. Boy, I'll tell you, I've done plenty of Zoom meetings, and I had to pull out my jacket and everything to get all dressed up for you here in person. It's really nice to be together, take Spencer's advice and network. I've already spoken with a lot of you, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about using data to build stronger communities, because believe it or not, everybody in this room, whether you're associated with the lab or pretreatment or fog, you all deal with data on a day-to-day basis, and it's really how you deal with it that defines your program. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that some programs are doing across the country to deal with data more effectively, so they can be out in the community, develop relationships, and do other special things that we'll talk about in a little bit through the presentation. I think that the biggest thing is when I talk to folks all over the country, 300 programs or more, one of the things that I find as a common thread among the most effective and innovative programs that I talk with is that they're all really, they're excited about being a part of the community, just like we heard here. It's a lifeline that you're providing. You want to make sure that you're protecting the publicly owned treatment works and the life and the environment through everything that you do. And if you can be more effective in doing that, you'll be able to get out in the community, build those relationships, go through your permits with your industries, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So first thing I wanted to talk about is getting away from paperwork and data entry and using technology to be able to do that. Really like tracking, managing, and producing the permits. Importing all of those samples that you take and that you're tracking from the industries, as well as violations and all of the reporting that's associated with compliance. So with that in mind, I wanted to go through one of the case studies for Marlborough, Massachusetts. This case study was actually published in TPO magazine. Who reads TPO on a regular basis? A couple people, right on. It's good stuff. I think this was published in May of this year. And just to give you a little bit of a background with the program, they have 2 wastewater treatment plants. They've got 15 permitted significant industries, and then they've got other industries that they take samples for, generally, for surcharge. And then approximately 300 FSE and 40 dental offices. Matt, who we'll get to know a little bit, that runs the program, he manages 2 communities as well as the I&I efforts and spill mitigation and review. So it's a lot. And I picked this case study because I thought it might resonate with a lot of the programs here today. About the same size for a lot of the programs, and I know that there's a lot of folks, I've already had conversations that have told me that they are having a hard time hiring people, and they're way down. Colorado Springs has 3 people to run their program, basically. It's crazy. It's crazy what you all are asked to do on a daily basis. And that's what Matt, our hero here, is faced with. He's one person. He has tons of hotspots around town because of all the grease. There's tons of grease going into both of those plants. And the other thing is he was having a really hard time going through all the lab reports that he would get in. He does use a contract lab for all of his authority samples, and they would report one way, and then of course all of his industries, they use about 4 different contract labs to do their self-monitoring samples. And of course these bench sheets would come in and call total mercury, call it by total mercury or mercury total or something else. It was all over the board. So he was having a real hard time just getting consistency with the data, both from his program as well as the industry submittals. And then ultimately, and this might resonate with y'all too, the fact is that he was always feeling like he was neglecting something, because Matt's a real particular guy, and that's great to be an industrial pretreatment coordinator. In addition, so he had an old database, and basically that was being used to just keep the sample data. He wasn't doing much else with it. And so when he took over the program, he created a bunch of different spreadsheets. Spreadsheets for the industry samples and his samples and those schedules, violations, another spreadsheet for the industry inspections, another spreadsheet for fog inspections. There were spreadsheets all over the place. And he was always feeling like he was having to go back and forth between spreadsheets and trying to remember how to follow up with a violation and what's the enforcement plan and when's that due. So he was having a really hard time, and ultimately, he felt like if he was neglecting things, he was putting the plant at risk and ultimately his community at risk, and he needed to be able to address that. So he got really aggressive about having technology help with collecting, managing, and reporting on the data that he has to collect with all of the with his program. And so it was quite a journey for him. And ultimately, he didn't feel, just like the folks that I've had conversations with in this room, he was so overwhelmed and feeling like he was spread so thin, he didn't feel like he could even go on vacation, much less, being a part of the community and relying on the data and being out in the community to develop the relationships that he felt were so important. And so, the guy wanted to go on vacation. And with all of these different spreadsheets, he didn't feel like anybody would be able to understand what was going on. Nobody had visibility. It was just him. And, that's just not sustainable. So, what do you do about that? Here's a quote from the magazine, and ultimately he's like, hey, I know that I need to get some tools, and that's going to allow me to be a more important and a better part of the community, and being able to work with the industries, be able to work with the FSEs, set and manage expectations, and really create a sustainable program. So how does that look? Well, he took that old database and he upgraded it, moved it up into the cloud. So now he can at least have all of the data available to him wherever he wants it. So it's really important where he can access the data, do all kinds of stuff right in the cloud. So that was the first thing that he did in his aggressive journey into managing data better so that he can spend more time in the community, like we saw in that quote. From there, what he did was a real concerted effort to set up that database to support his permits and his program. So all of the outfalls for all of his industries and the parameters associated with those outfalls, daily limits, what kind of collection method, all of that stuff. So now he has that all in a database, and he can compare that with the samples and be able to automate the process of compliance. The other thing that he did was set up inspection schedules and permit schedules. So all of this is now taken care of automatically, and if the industries are on a 3-year permit cycle, then he was able to just set that up with renewals on the permit, gets reminders, and is able to send out the permits, or the permit renewal package 6 months ahead of time, and then he knows when to expect that back from the industry. So that's the core here. Let's see if I can do this. Uh-oh. That's the power button, apparently. Okay. That's setting up the database, really being able to support the permit and the overall program. So everything is automated from a scheduling perspective in that database. From there, he's able to send any of the activities that he needs to do, inspections, permit renewals, his sampling activities, the industry sampling activities. Those are all sent to Outlook Calendar. So now he's got not only the database in the cloud and accessed everywhere, now he can just look at his Outlook Calendar and know, oh, I've got 5, samples to do. I've got 2 inspections that I need to do this week. Everything's right there for him. So he's not running through spreadsheets anymore. As far as collecting the data, he got really aggressive about that. He saw that one of the things that he identified was all of the bottlenecks associated with collecting data. So we wanted to get really aggressive about that. And with the samples, what he was able to do is, now that he's got that all in his database and he knows that he's, maybe he's just taking samples for Acme Corporation on an annual basis, so one time a year. And then Acme Corporation is submitting their self-monitoring reports 4 times a year. And so we wanted he wanted to automate all of that. So when he needed to take his samples, he'd go out there, take his samples, go to his contract lab, and his contract lab would produce a report from their limbs that would go directly into the software. So he's not having to do any of the the manual data entry associated with his samples. So that's all right there. It goes into the database. The database tells him whether there's any violations, and then he's able to go through and automatically create a violation. What that does is a couple of things. One is it can generate the notice of violation, for instance, but it also keeps that violation in the database so that he can report on it for his annual report. Because if nothing else, you got to get Al your annual report. Right? Most people are sending it to Al. So having that data just in a database so that you can be able to do things with it and report on it is really important. The automation that provides, not only in providing better communication to your industry, but also the reporting at the end of the year, so that you're not going back through all of these spreadsheets to figure out how many violations and what sort of enforcement response there was. So if he takes that sample, throws it over to his lab, lab sends him a report that just gets imported into his database. That's all taken care of. Now he can really concentrate on managing the violations, and of course the database is set up to carry out his enforcement response plans, whatever that might be. So and that's going to be tracked. So that's all managed inside that database and automated form. So you can really keep track of everything going on. And now he can get rid of one of those spreadsheets, right, with the samples and the sample schedule and all of the samples and any of the violations associated with that, with those samples. Get rid of the spreadsheet. It's all in there. It's in one place. Next thing that he did was, he's only sampling Acme Corporation one time a year, but he's getting the self-monitoring reports from Acme Corporation 4 times a year. So that's a whole, that's a lot more data. I want to be able to address that. So same sort of thing, through a Chrome Air-approved system, the cross-media electronic reporting rule, Chrome Air-approved system, he's now able to import the full SMR, the self-monitoring report, electronically from his industries. And ultimately what that means is that the samples and results come in just like his, so that it hits the database and he knows right off whether there's a violation, and he can go through and create that violation and any enforcement response plans that are associated with that. So this is now really coming together, right? So he's got automation from his samples. He knows, when they're due, what they look like, all the parameters that are associated with them, and those are automatically imported. He's doing that with the industries as well now. So the industries create their self-monitoring report. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was that he was really struggling with all the lab sheets, right? They were all formatted differently, had different names for the parameters. Now that all went away because it's through a template. The contract lab just imports the samples and results from sends a report to the database. That's imported. The industry looks through it and approves it and sends it on. And so all of that data just gets into the database. The last thing that he wanted to address was the inspections. So the database creates the inspection schedule, and then the schedule's sent to his Outlook. He knows how many inspections he needs to do, so he can really plan his day and week. So the other thing that he was able to do is digitize that inspection. So using an electronic inspection form, he can just take his tablet out, fill out the electronic inspection form, take any pictures that are associated with his inspection, get sign off on the document, and send it over to his customer. And by the way, he does call them customers, which I really like. I think it's a good way to foster that community and partnership. And so those are some of the aspects of collecting the data up front to populate the database, so that now he can really manage his schedule. He's got all the reporting that he needs, and he's able to create the permit because all the data is in the database, and he can he's tracking those permits, and then he's also tracking any of the violations and also the enforcement response to those violations. So he knows exactly where he is in the process for any violation. It's really great. So now he's gotten rid of a couple of different spreadsheets. He's gotten rid of his sampling spreadsheet. He's gotten rid of his inspection spreadsheet. He's gotten rid of his violation spreadsheet, all for his industrial pretreatment program. But he still has some more spreadsheets to get rid of because he's got that 300 FSE, right? So how do we get rid of those spreadsheets? Well, we continue to automate. Same deal with the inspections. Now there's just more of them, kind of clogging up his Outlook calendar, but you got to keep track of all of these inspections, right? So again, it starts with the database. This database is up in the cloud, and he's able to configure it to represent his ordinance and everything that he needs for his program. So his ordinance is a pretty good ordinance. It has things like, hey, we're going to come inspect you, as well as clean out frequencies. I know I've talked to a lot of you about these sorts of things, and so his ordinance is pretty good, where it actually talks about a cleaning frequency of at least, I think it's 90 days for an in-ground interceptor, and at least a month, once a month for an internal grease removal device. And so now you have some set frequencies for the interceptor cleaner. And then, the inspection, and then there's some things around violations and enforcements. How many fog programs, formal, I'll say, do we have in the room? Raise of hands. Yeah, that's good. I was actually in Michigan 2 weeks ago. I asked the same question, and there's about a fourth of the room. I don't know what it is with Michigan. I guess they like to get their use out of the vac trucks. But we've got a lot of fog programs in the room here, and it's really important to be able to track and manage the cleanouts for the interceptors, right? That way they aren't violating the 25% rule like EPA talks about. We also want to do the inspections. So we're building things out. We're building out the database to support his efforts and the ordinance. And now he's got the database to really be able to set and manage the expectations within his community. In automating the data collection process, now when he goes out and does an inspection, he's got just a uniform electronic inspection form, and that way there's not a lot of interpretation. He can go through and look at anything, and he doesn't even have to do the inspections if he decides to go on vacation. He's getting closer to that vacation. He's not there yet, because it's not all together yet, but he's feeling more comfortable. And so he wanted to be able to have somebody else do inspections from time to time. And one of the ways that he knew that he could do that was to have a uniform inspection form for the fog program, where somebody can just kind of go through and check boxes and make sure that everything's, the sink is installed properly. But let's just say that, I don't know, like Ken's presentation, I think it was the prep sink would have a food processor in it, right? And so if that would be a violation, let's say, and so if there's a violation, now he can document that on the form, email it over to his FSE customer, document it in the database, and make sure that that prep sink gets replumbed, and we're now making sure that the waste streams go into the grease removal device. So all of this is coming together. Now we're getting rid of another spreadsheet, right? The fog spreadsheet. And finally, he wants to get rid of one more spreadsheet, and that is how to keep track of the pump outs or the clean outs for the grease removal devices. Now, the database has all of these grease removal devices set up in it with a frequency. So, you know, the Bob's Big Burger on 5th and Main has a 1,000-gallon interceptor in back, and that's all, and so it's scheduled to be pumped out every 90 days. That schedule is automatic, and it's on his Outlook calendar, so he knows when it's due. And now all he has to do is actually verify that it got done, right? So he employed some technology just through a web page where either haulers or FSEs can log in, take a picture of the manifest, or enter in some data about who cleaned it out and how much got cleaned out. And now he's gotten rid of the last spreadsheet, because now what he can do is take that data that he gets from the hauler or the restaurant, match it up with the schedule of the pump outs, and now he knows exactly who's pumped out and when. So he can just run a report, says, hey, show me everybody that has a pump out scheduled for the month of October. And then he can say, all right, show me everybody that hasn't been pumped out yet. And now he's got a list of, say, 10 restaurants. And now he knows where to spend his time with his fog program. So it's not just a shotgun approach anymore. He's really spending his time on those that need a little bit of extra love and maybe education on what that thing is out in the back and what to do with it. And that they do, in fact, need to get that thing pumped out every 90 days. The haulers actually like that too, and because they know that they can be on a schedule and that the restaurants now have somebody that is watching these and has real-time visibility into the activities. So he's been able to now get rid of all of his spreadsheets. He's been able to automate his inspections for the fog program and match up the pump out activities for all of the FSEs that are in the database. He's got all that stuff in his Outlook calendar. He's able to generate reports about who's pumped out and who hasn't for the month or whatever. And he's also keeping track of any violations. And he does actually issue violations on late pump outs and inspection details. So again, same sort of deal. When he issues a violation that's in the database, he can track and manage it in association of the enforcement response plan according to his ordinance. So now, good old Matt can go on vacation, right? The results in the article say that they've seen a big decrease in the O&M activity because where they were going around and doing a lot of reactive maintenance of the pipes, now they're better able to just keep a schedule because he's able to control the grease getting into the collection system. And he's actually seen that in the plants too. Big decrease in grease in the plants. No surprise there, right? He's getting consistent data from his IUs now, whereas the samples report from the labs were all over the place. Maybe the industries would forget to submit their QA/QC report along with their SMR, and now that that's all electronic and through a template, the industries know exactly what to do. They get a little dashboard that says, hey, you've not included your QA/QC report, so they do that and then send it off, and it gets imported into the database. He's able to fulfill his goal of spending more time in the field, because now he doesn't have to worry about all of that data entry with the inspections and the samples and figuring out when the permits are due. He can be more active in the community. And by the way, he's now his title is actually foreman of water and wastewater, which is essentially a superintendent. So after implementing these technology, he was able to really dial in on things, and the city recognized that and promoted him. So he's actually hired somebody else, and it's a really cool thing. So if you want to check out that case study, it is in TPO, and you can read about it yourself. The other case study that I wanted to focus on was specifically around fog, and how some programs are taking fog sort of to the fog regulatory effort to a new level. And I've talked to some of you about this already, but we'll see how Seattle is keeping their restaurants up to date in their database. We'll also look at strengthening the maintenance log management, prioritizing inspections, which is really important for them, as well as increasing the effectiveness of the inspections, all through technology. So just again, a little bit of background on Seattle. They have about 5,000 FSE. That's a large number. I was talking to Colorado Springs yesterday, I think, and there's some debate on how many FSEs they get to manage. But Seattle has about 5,000, just for a sanity check for y'all. They have 5 inspectors and 1 fog manager. So that's a whole lot of FSE per inspector, and they're scrambling. So Gary, the fog manager, realized and understood the power of having a cloud-based software so that he and his team can really have the visibility and access to data anywhere. And they wanted to be able to understand what's going on with their program, who's doing what, and really have more insights than they were able to have with just a database sitting on a server and that they had to access from the office. So the challenge is, there's the team. It was exceedingly difficult to keep track of who they were actually regulating. So the FSE list would change all the time. And by the way, Seattle is in Clark County, and Clark County actually maintains the business license database for the whole county. So what was happening is that the city, and Gary, would kind of go begging, hands and knees, to King County, for an updated FSE list, and they would provide that about once a year. So they had huge import of new FSEs and all these changes once a year, and it was not an effective way to keep track of the changes in their fog program. So that was a big challenge. The fog data wasn't supporting the overflow activities, and by that what I mean is that they weren't talking to each other. The fog program was doing their compliance thing, and the O&M team was doing their jetting the lines thing, and there was no communication and no data exchange between the two operations. So they weren't able to inspect all of the FSE as frequently as they felt was required. There's not enough inspectors. We all hear that, and tons of FSE, and so that was a big issue for them. Inconsistent inspection data, and then ineffective enforcement efforts. So they had a very verbose, I guess, inspection paper inspection form where the inspector would write all kinds of notes on it and everything. Some of it was hard to read, and it was not very consistent. One inspector would prioritize some things over other inspectors, so it was sort of a moving target. And then because of the volume, the enforcement efforts would fall through the cracks and be hard to manage and maintain. So big challenges in a big program. And so we looked at this in phases. Oh, by the way, so this was actually published in November 2020 in the Water and Wastewater Digest, I believe. It's on the slide. So the first phase was an integration with GIS. This is really, really important in being able to bring the data together. And there's some really smart people that are associated with this program, and the article goes into some detail around this. But what they implemented was an automatic import of data from the King County database into the city's GIS database. So that now happens every quarter. So that's way better than yearly, and it's about the right frequency. They can adjust that if they need to. Right now they feel like that's a good frequency. From the GIS, it's really nice because the city has all of their infrastructure in their GIS. They know exactly where the hot spots are in their GIS, and now they've got all of the FSE on a layer, so they know exactly what FSEs are contributing to that hotspot. That's one element of what they've really innovated with, and that is to prioritize their inspection. They've come up with a really nice algorithm that takes into account several different factors. One of those factors is how far away the FSE is from a hotspot. They know that because it's in the GIS database already. Another factor is what fixtures those restaurants have. They don't know that yet. You know, the data that they're getting from King County is just like name of the restaurant, address, pretty basic information, but enough to get it on the GIS layer, so they can start to build things out. Once that data is in the GIS layer, they then take it from their GIS database and port it into their FOG database. So then their FOG database automatically creates an initial inspection so that they can now collect all of the other data that they need for their algorithm. What fixtures, what sort of grease trap they have, do they have a Trapzilla? Or is it an in-ground interceptor? A lot of the Seattle FSE are really old establishments. They're grandfathered in, so that's one of the other struggles that they have is that sometimes, if they don't make any changes to their restaurant, they don't have to put a grease trap in. Even if they do, a lot of times they are very limited with the room, so they end up putting in an undersink or internal hydromechanical. And so, but all of that goes into this algorithm, and so they use the same kind of technology that Marlboro does to go out in the field, collect this information. They've got a form that's very standardized so that they know exactly all of the things that they need to look at. So when a new inspector comes in, he or she can go through this form and know exactly what to look for, and that data then goes back into GIS. From there, there's a calculation, and the FSE is ranked from 1 to 4, and that provides them with the ability to prioritize their inspections. So if the FSE is way far away from any hotspot, and they've got all the fixtures right, and they've got a 1,000-gallon interceptor down out back, they're not going to get inspected all that often. Conversely, you get it. It's really cool. Integration with GIS. So now, GIS and the FOG database really working together. Not only that, the operations and maintenance team now knows what's going on with the FOG program too. They know when the restaurants were last inspected, when what's going on, what the ranking is, and as far as this prioritization goes. So the data is much more visible now. It's really cool. So they're using those FOG factors, and then the other thing is that now they're really able to make informed decisions around the data. And they're like, okay, we've got 5,000 FSE. At the beginning, they only had 4 inspectors. They were able to justify another inspector based on the data. Like, look, this is the prioritization that we've worked out, and we're not going to be able to fulfill our inspection requirements with 4 people. We have to have a 5th. And the board was like, yeah, we get it. Because it's backed up by data. So they're able to actually use that for the staff planning and allocations. Phase 2, really being able to then take that data and use it for inspections. So not only collecting the data out in the field through tablet and mobile device, but also really being able to collect the data consistently. So that provides them with a baseline of what's going on, whether their algorithm is actually right, how much grease is being produced, and from what sources. And then using that data to build relationships within the community, because now they're very consistent. No matter what inspector is going to the restaurant, they're very consistent in their messaging. And so they can all set and manage expectations associated with a FOG program very effectively, because this is what we're going to be inspecting you on, this is what we expect to see, and so forth. So really being able to build the relationships within the community was very, very important to them. The other thing that it allowed them to do was streamline the enforcement actions. So where it used to be that a violation might be written and the enforcement was a little bit nebulous because they were writing it down on a form and it was all longhand. Now it's very, very clear because it's a standardized form. Do this, and actually what they do is require the FSE to send a picture in. So they don't even have to go out and re-inspect. They just ask the FSE to, if the grease removal device exceeded 25% rule, take a picture when it's cleaned, send it to us, good to go. So now, again, you're keeping track of those violations and any of the enforcements that are associated with them. Phase 3 hasn't been implemented yet, but they will be collecting information from their haulers and their FSEs to line up their cleanouts with the activities associated with that. So now we've really got the FOG program. This is what it looks like. The FSEs are being imported into GIS. You've got the automation of the inspections, and phase 3 would be haulers, so that they can really track and manage their schedule and the violations. So here are the results published in that article. In 4 years, they've been able to cut the SSOs by more than 50%. They've increased their inspections, so getting their faces out in the community by 300%. Now, part of that does include that additional inspector that I mentioned earlier, and then really being able to streamline that compliance workflow through sending in pictures and not having to go out there again to re-inspect. So one of the quotes, I think, I'm not going to read it, but it's a good one. The biggest thing is, got to know who you're regulating, right? So automating that process, being able to bring in data from a business license database or another database so that you know who you're regulating and who you need to establish these relationships with. Automating the data collection, whether it's the sampling, inspections, permit process. Being able to use the data to ensure the compliance, and I'll just leave you with a quick story. One of the ones that didn't make the list here, but I think is really important, is ultimately what these two programs are trying to do is get away from data, manual data entry and all of the other stuff associated with it, so that they can be out in the community and develop those relationships. Orlando does a really nice job of that, and they've sort of taken it to the next level, where it's really cool. They've been able to automate their industrial pretreatment and fog programs, and that allowed them to do some pretty extensive outreach. And Orlando has a really great private grease collection program. So all of the condos around, Orlando, they're really reaching out and educating the public about recycled grease. And they've actually taken it to a new level where they've got orchards on their pretreatment or their plant property, and they were doing some public outreach associated with that, fertilization, water reuse. And one of these guys actually became a beekeeper, and now they're doing bees, and it's sort of the full life cycle of how water and wastewater affects everything that we do. And now they've actually got a community garden, and they bring in the less fortunate, and they've got fresh vegetables and fruits that they're giving out to the community. So those are some of the things that is possible when you can automate a lot of the processes that you all do on a daily basis, so that you can strengthen and increase your community involvement. So I think I ran out a little of time, but cool. Yeah, that's it. What sort of questions?